Welcome to the Adjusters Roundtable. We're excited to have with us today Daniel Kern, a public adjuster with our firm. Danny is licensed in multiple states, Florida, Texas, North Carolina, and Georgia currently.
Correct.
And Danny, you settled over $11 million in new money claims for our clients. So Danny, pleasure to have you here today. Look forward to chatting with you about some very important topics.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Love to get the opportunity to just share some valuable information with the folks out there that may be going through a difficult time right now, and hopefully something they might hear here can help them down the road.
Well, today one of the topics that we're going to discuss is overturning a claim denial and how that affects you with your duties after loss. There's some very interesting information out there for clients that I think is going to be very valuable for anybody that has a residential commercial insurance policy. And so, to kind of better educate you on those things, we want to give you real world examples, actual case studies of claims and clients that we've represented that will help you understand this process a little bit better and how you get through that. So Danny, you have a client who, as I understand, sustained damage from Hurricane Helene. There's 2 buildings on the property?
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. The insurance company actually denied the claim outright for actually a multitude of reasons, not just one.
Right.
One structure, as I understand, they denied for wind damage, claiming that flood caused the damage. And then the other structure, they denied claiming pre-existing damage. And this was a wind claim for both, right?
Correct. Yes.
So they used multiple different exclusions to deny a claim in its entirety. And as I've been told, that you've actually settled this claim for policy limits.
Yes.
So you were actually able to help the client go from a denied claim for multiple reasons to actually getting a policy limits claim. So Danny, again, thank you so much for being here today. And I would love to hear how did you make that happen? If somebody has a claim denial, whether it's a straightforward denial or multiple peril denial, that's a complicated thing.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear how you helped your client get a policy limit claim out of a denial.
Yeah, absolutely. So for this particular example, we have perfected a formula with assisting our clients, whether the claim is denied outright, underpaid, or if it's a brand new claim. And so basically we have different processes that we go through, depending on the circumstances, whether it's bringing in experts that we have vetted that can substantiate and back up what we're claiming in damages, and then also go through in detail as far as the rebuild estimates, what was damaged directly from this particular event or any event, and just making sure that we are able to document everything as a whole and present this package to the insurance company so that way they have all the facts that they need to make the proper decisions.
That's awesome. So, you have a process, like you said, that whether it's a denied claim, an underpaid claim, it's a process you've perfected over time.
Yep.
And it does vary based upon the circumstances of the claim. And if we're dealing with a denied claim in particular, clients, a lot of people don't understand, policyholders don't understand that when you file a claim, you do have duties after loss, right? You do have obligations that you have to comply with when you suffer a loss. And, in a denied claim, there are some circumstances where you may be able to get coverage overturned, but you may not. And, the process that you've implemented, a lot of people think if it's a denied claim, your only option is to sue the insurance company. Well, Danny's done a great job with his client of providing the documentation necessary to get them to that point where they can have that conversation with the insurance company, show them that information, and actually get it overturned without ever engaging in a long, arduous litigation process. Can you give me a little bit more information about how you actually brought that documentation, that information to the insurance company, and how that changed their narrative, how that changed their determination from a denied claim to a covered claim?
Yeah, absolutely. The process itself from start to finish, getting from the denied letter versus the actual check in hand, it didn't happen overnight. There was a lot of work that was put in to be able to provide all the documentation that showed that the insurer was responsible for making payment. Now, dealing with the desk adjusters that were assigned to the claim, they actually stuck with their initial stance, even after we presented all of our documentation. It wasn't until later on to where the relationships that I actually had developed with this particular carrier, specifically one of their upper management, that we were able to get them to get a set of eyeballs on it and know or realize that they were wrong. So it was a bit of a challenge, but because of the prior history that I had with all the clients that I've had working with this particular carrier, I was able to develop not only with their senior level desk adjusters, but the next level above that. You know, the big time decision makers, you know, the director of the claims operations. And, you know, from that, you know, we were able to, you know, walk away with what the insurer owed.
Right. So, and it is a process too, because you know you've touched on a lot of things. You have documentation that you needed, expert documentation, your documentation, all of it compiled in a way that's digestible for the insurance company, to show them, hey, listen, maybe the determination that you made wasn't necessarily accurate. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot of times with insurance companies now is that they're using a lot of third-party companies. So they'll send out maybe 2 or 3 different entities to provide them with different reports. They rely upon those reports to make their determination, and you're able to actually come in, bring experts that are necessary along with your expertise, compile that documentation, and have your report, and you're able to overturn sometimes what we deem as improper denials, right? Is that kind of how that worked?
Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly.
And then other examples too, you know, what we talked about with like duties after loss. So, you know, if you file a claim and you wait for a determination to occur, and let's say you do get a denial, are there circumstances where someone might not be able to overturn that though, and what should they be aware of?
I'm glad you kind of touched on that because obviously the duties after the loss, that's in every single policy out there. So if there is a loss that occurs on your home, you know, no matter what size it is or what type of claim it is, you do have the responsibility to take actions. Specifically, you know, you must mitigate your losses. So you got to prevent your home from having any additional damages than what has already occurred. But also, it's most important to note that the onus and responsibility to find, prove, and quantify all the damages falls on you as the homeowner. It does not fall on your insurance company. So what does that mean? You have to identify exactly what occurred at your home. You have to come up with the proper amount that it's going to cost to bring your home back to pre-loss condition, and you have to prove it, right? So taking photos and documenting all the damages. You know, if we're, you know, hurricane season right now, it's going to be wise for you to go out there and start taking pictures of your home now, interior and exterior wise, before the damage occurs. Additionally, there is a proof of loss form. Basically what this is a formal statement, a letter that shows exactly how much you're claiming in damages. Now, how do you get there, right? That's where our expertise comes in. You know, sure, you can go ahead and try and get a couple different estimates from different contractors for whatever that particular loss you're suffering, but are they going to be able to quantify everything that is your policy affords you? And not only with this proof of loss form, right? It's important to have that, but a lot of the carriers out there have deadlines of when those need to be presented. Initially started seeing some carriers having 60 days to where you have to provide that proof of loss. Otherwise, your claim could potentially be denied. I've seen them as little as 30 days now.
That's right.
How does somebody even get there? You know,
It's interesting because, you know, we'll use, we work in multiple states, obviously, residential, commercial claims, you name it. But Florida in particular, you know, they've changed the laws where insurance companies have 60 days to make a claim determination. If there's no circumstances that, you know, can delay that, that's out of their, you know, control. But having said that, you know, they have 60 days to make a claim determination in that particular state. And you and I have seen on a claim where that's great. That timeline has come down from 90 days. But this particular policy we looked at had requirements for a policyholder to provide documentation within 30 days.
Yeah.
You know, so that timeline is tightened even more for policyholders, and they need to be aware that even if they suffered, and that particular claim was a pretty traumatic event. It was a tornado that spawned from a hurricane that caused significant damage to a home. And in the midst of recovery and, you know, physically and with their property, they now had a timeline, a very short timeline, to provide all this documentation in a manner that's acceptable by the insurance company. And the insurance company didn't even have to ask for it. It's actually in the policy. It's a requirement the day that the loss occurred. that's tough to do. That's really tough to do, and to know what exact manner and what type of documentation actually needs to be provided. And you're right, that is exactly what we do. That is the process that we talked about. That is the stepping in the policyholder's shoes, to be able to assist them take that weight off of their shoulders when they've just suffered a loss, and make sure that they've provided all that documentation to the insurance company so that you preserve your claim. I mean, we talk about that all the time. Negotiating a settlement is one thing, but there's nothing to negotiate if you don't preserve your claim and your ability to negotiate that claim, right? And so with these timelines becoming more restrictive for policyholders, it's imperative that they understand that this is likely in their policy.
Yeah, and not only that, but this proof of loss, it must encompass everything you're claiming in damages, right? So we're not just talking about building material to your home, your roof or your plumbing. We're also talking about any potential other structures that were on your property that were damaged, any of your contents that were damaged because of a certain event. And if your home's no longer livable, what is those additional living expenses that falls under your coverage D, right? So this proof of loss form needs to be compiled within the entire policy and within entire claim. We're not just talking about certain sections here. So yeah, I definitely feel bad for the individuals that try and do it on their own without realizing that there is help for them out there, because how can you even, where do you start?
Yeah. And this really speaks to the topic of today about claim denials and overturning claim denials, right? It's something that can be done, but if you run afoul of all these duties after loss, you've prejudiced the insurance company, and it is really hard at that point to overturn a claim. So we obviously do recommend that if you do suffer a loss, that's something where you do reach out for assistance. We consider ourselves policy experts, right? More than happy to review a policy, explain what's required under that policy. And if it's a situation where you did get a claim denial and it's still preserved, we'd be more than happy to try to pick up that fight for you. But ultimately, at the end of the day, yes, it is something where if you get a claim denial, we certainly can try to assist you, overturn that. Danny has been extremely successful in that, taking a completely denied claim to a policy limits claim, which is no easy task, and that's without having to litigate a claim potentially for years to overturn that. And, being, in this case, the property was substantially damaged. It wasn't livable. So you're talking about a situation where you're not in your property for possibly multiple years before you get the necessary funds to rebuild that home. So Danny, I commend you for the job that you did for that particular client.
Thank you.
I know that was not an easy task, but one that is certainly within your capabilities to do.
Well, it was right on the doorstep of going to litigation, right? The clients, they've already spoke with legal counsel. They were preparing documents and getting everything submitted. And, I respectfully asked, give me one more shot, and I'm very happy that it all worked out. But, I just know of what the path it could have been. And, you're looking at potentially 12, 18, sometimes 24 months before we got the results that we did.
Right. So. Yeah. Great job.
Thank you.
Danny, thank you so much for your time today. And we just appreciate everybody joining us out there today. If you would, click on subscribe, definitely smash that like button, and definitely follow us for more valuable content. And we look forward to chatting with you again soon.